I never expected a routine credit check to unravel my entire life. It was a slow Tuesday evening, and I was curled up on the couch, half watching some true crime documentary while absent-mindedly reviewing my finances. It was a habit I'd developed over the years as a financial security analyst. Check, verify, double-check. Always be aware of the numbers. But tonight, something didn't add up. A $100,000 loan. Taken out in my name. My stomach tightened as I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I hadn't applied for any loan. My credit history was pristine, my financial records meticulously maintained. There had to be a mistake. A system error, maybe? I clicked into the details, my fingers ice cold against the keyboard. My name, my social security number, my address. No mistake. The date of approval flashed on the screen, just 3 months ago. Right around the time Justin, my fiancé, had proudly announced that he'd found an investor for his startup. A silent partner who believed in his vision. We had celebrated that night. He had taken me to one of those trendy rooftop restaurants where the drinks cost as much as a meal, where the dim lighting and expensive decor made everything feel exclusive. I had toasted to his success with an expensive glass of wine, kissed him under the city skyline, and told him how proud I was of him. I had believed him. Now, staring at the cold, undeniable truth in front of me, my hand trembled on the mouse. I had been the investor all along. Justin had stolen my identity. A cold, sinking feeling settled in my gut. My fiancé, the man I had planned to marry in less than a year, had taken out a 6-figure loan in my name. And he had done it so seamlessly, so confidently, that he hadn't even flinched when I'd told him how excited I was about his mysterious backer. I forced my breathing to slow. Panicking wouldn't help. I needed to understand the full picture before I did anything rash. Digging deeper, I traced the transaction history and cross-referenced accounts. The loan was just the beginning. There were credit cards I'd never opened, accounts I'd never touched, money being funneled in and out like I was nothing more than a convenient front for something bigger. If Justin thought I wouldn't notice, if he thought I wouldn't uncover the truth, he had made the biggest mistake of his life. My first instinct was to storm into the bedroom and wake him up. Demand answers. But I stopped myself. Justin was a smooth talker. It was one of the things that had drawn me to him in the first place, his effortless charm, the way he could spin a story and make you believe every word. If I confronted him now, he would lie. He would twist the truth, feign innocence, make me doubt my own eyes. No, I needed proof. Concrete evidence. A way to take him down before he had the chance to cover his tracks. I glanced at the bedroom door, slightly ajar. I could hear his steady breathing from inside, deep and unbothered. Quietly, I grabbed my laptop and moved to the kitchen. My fingers hovered over my phone, hesitating for only a moment before I called Ellie Lawrence. Ellie wasn't just my best friend. She was one of the top digital forensics experts in the industry. If there was something to be found, she would find it. She answered on the first ring. Claire? Her voice was sharp with concern, even through the late-night haze. What's wrong? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I need you to help me take down a fraudster. A pause. Then, who? I exhaled, the weight of it settling in my chest. My fiancé. There was silence on the other end. Then a rustling sound, followed by a muttered curse. Give me the details. I walked her through everything. The loan. The fraudulent accounts. The money trail that led right back to Justin. By the time I finished, she had switched into full investigation mode. Okay. First, don't confront him. Not yet. He's too good at lying, and you don't have enough hard proof to pin him down. You need to dig deeper. I know, I said quietly. I'll run a background check on him, she continued. Deep dive. Not the surface-level stuff you find on Google. I mean real records. If he's done this before, there will be breadcrumbs. A thought struck me, and my stomach twisted. Ellie, if he did this to me, do you think he's done it before? To someone else? There was a heavy pause. We'll find out. I swallowed hard. Send me all the information you have, she instructed. Account numbers, email addresses, anything you can pull. I'll start tracking his activity. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'll send it now. We ended the call, and I wasted no time compiling everything. Screensh asterisk TS, transaction records, anything that could serve as evidence. My hands were steady now, my mind focused. Justin had played me for a fool. Now, it was my turn to play him. By the time I finally closed my laptop, exhaustion tugged at me, but I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not with the weight of betrayal sitting heavy on my chest. I padded back to the bedroom, slipping beneath the covers as carefully as possible. Justin stirred slightly, but didn't wake. I turned on my side, staring at the wall, my mind racing. I had loved him. I had trusted him. And he had stolen from me. The man sleeping beside me wasn't who I thought he was. And tomorrow, I would start proving it. I woke up before Justin the next morning, my mind already running through everything I needed to do. He was still asleep, his face relaxed, peaceful, like a man without a single worry in the world. It made my stomach twist with anger. How many times had I woken up next to him, believing I was safe? Believing that we were building a future together? The thought made my skin crawl. I slipped out of bed quietly, grabbing my phone from the nightstand. Ellie had already sent me a message. Ellie ran initial searches. He's clean on the surface, but I need more time to dig. Something feels off. Send me his work history. Old phone numbers. Anything weird you remember. I walked to the kitchen and started making coffee, trying to act normal. Justin always woke up around 8, sometimes earlier if he had meetings, so I needed to be careful. I poured a cup and leaned against the counter, my brain working through everything Ellie had said. Something felt off. I had known Justin for 3 years. He was charming, intelligent, ambitious. But I realized now how much of our relationship had been based on what he told me rather than what I had seen with my own eyes. Where did he grow up? Some small town in Ohio, he had said, but I had never met a single person from his past. What had he done before his startup? He had mentioned a few failed business ventures, but the details were always vague. He never talked about his family. Never shared childhood stories unless I directly asked, and even then, the answers felt rehearsed. The realization sent a chill down my spine. I needed to know who I was really engaged to. Justin's voice broke my thoughts. Morning, babe. I turned, watching him stretch as he walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. He smiled, leaning in to kiss me on the forehead like he did every morning. It took everything in me not to recoil. Instead, I smiled back, forcing my face to stay neutral. Morning. He grabbed a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. Got a lot of work today? Yeah, I said, keeping my voice casual. A few reports to go through. I had never been more grateful for my job. Justin knew I worked odd hours sometimes, doing deep financial dives for clients. If I needed to disappear into my laptop all day, he wouldn't question it. He nodded, scrolling through his phone. I'm meeting with my investor later. Might be a long day. Investor. The nerve of him. I kept my expression neutral, taking a sip of coffee. That's great. Are you close to finalizing everything? He grinned. Almost. Liar. I forced myself to smile. I'm happy for you. Justin kissed my cheek before heading back toward the bedroom, and I felt my stomach twist. I needed to get out of here. I grabbed my laptop and keys, shooting Ellie a text as I walked out the door. I need to get out of the apartment. Can I work from your place? Ellie, of course. Tell me everything when you get here. I drove across town to Ellie's apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. By the time I arrived, she already had coffee waiting. She took one look at me and shook her head. God, Claire. She pulled me inside. Sit. Start from the beginning. I dropped my bag onto the couch, running a hand through my hair. You were right. Something's off. The more I think about it, the more I realize how little I actually know about him. Ellie grabbed her laptop. Good. That's a start. Let's dig. For the next 3 hours, we combed through every record we could find. Justin Carlyle. The name was clean. No criminal history. No bankruptcies. No lawsuits. But something didn't add up. Ellie leaned back, chewing on her pen. His work history is weird. No concrete records of any past employment, just vague mentions of consulting firms and entrepreneurial ventures. She pulled up a database I didn't recognize. I ran his social security number through some deeper searches. No prior addresses before 5 years ago. My stomach dropped. That's not possible. She turned the screen toward me. It's like he didn't exist before then. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Who the hell was I engaged to? I swallowed hard. Can we track where the money went? Ellie nodded, pulling up the loan records I had sent her. It was transferred to multiple accounts. Most of them offshore. He's laundering it. I felt sick. Ellie's fingers flew over the keyboard. Hold on. I found something. I leaned in as she clicked through a series of documents. The LLC he used to register his startup, it's fake. He filed paperwork in Delaware under a shell corporation. My breath caught. He set up a fraudulent company? Ellie nodded grimly. It gets worse. She clicked again. The same shell company was used in 2 other cases of financial fraud in the past 5 years. Both women reported identity theft. The room spun. I clutched the table. He's done this before. Ellie's face was grim. And if the pattern holds, he's planning to disappear soon. I felt like I couldn't breathe. 3 years. 3 years of my life wasted on a man who wasn't even real. I forced myself to focus. How do we stop him? Ellie's eyes darkened. We trap him. My phone buzzed. Justin. I took a deep breath before answering. Hey, babe, he said casually. Just checking in. You okay? I forced a smile into my voice. Yeah, just working. Good. I might be home late tonight. Big investor meeting. Investor. I clenched my jaw. I'll see you when you get home. We hung up and I turned to Ellie. I want to bury him. She smirked. Now you're speaking my language. We spent the next few hours planning. Step 1. Track his financial movements in real time. Ellie had already set up a monitoring system to flag any unusual activity. Step 2. Gather evidence. I needed to document everything, every fraudulent transaction, every false statement. Step 3. Find out who he was working with. A scam this elaborate wasn't a one-man job. I rubbed my temples. He'll run the moment he suspects something. Ellie nodded. That's why we have to be careful. You need to act normal. I swallowed hard. I don't know if I can. Ellie grabbed my hand. Yes, you can. And when we take him down, it'll be worth it. I took a deep breath. She was right. Justin thought he was in control. He had no idea he was already losing. I forced myself to go home that night, even though every part of me wanted to run. My fingers trembled slightly as I unlocked the door, stepping inside as if everything was normal. The apartment smelled like the cologne Justin always wore, the expensive kind he claimed was a gift from one of his clients. I wondered if anything he ever told me was true. He wasn't home yet. Good. I needed a moment to breathe. I walked into the bathroom and turned on the sink, splashing cold water on my face. My reflection in the mirror looked unfamiliar, tense, distant, like a woman I didn't recognize. How had I been so blind? How had I let him do this to me? Footsteps sounded outside the bathroom, followed by the creak of the front door opening. I quickly dried my face, forcing a neutral expression before stepping out into the hallway. Justin smiled as he set his keys on the counter, loosening his tie. Hey, babe. Long day? I nodded, crossing my arms to keep them from shaking. Yeah. You. He sighed, stretching like he was exhausted. Same. Meeting went well, though. My investor is really interested in scaling things up. I almost laughed. Scaling things up. What a joke. I forced a smile, stepping forward to kiss his cheek. That's great. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me in close. I can't wait for this all to be official, Claire. Once the business takes off, we're going to have everything we ever wanted. He smelled like expensive whiskey and lies. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat and nodded. I know. He pulled back slightly, studying my face. You okay? I forced myself to meet his gaze. Yeah, just tired. His fingers brushed over my cheek, and I had to resist the urge to step away. Get some rest, babe. I'll be in soon. I nodded and walked toward the bedroom, shutting the door behind me. My breath came out in a shuddering exhale as I pressed my back against the wood. I needed to get out of here. I couldn't keep up this act much longer. I climbed into bed, listening to the faint sounds of Justin moving around in the kitchen. I had to remind myself that this was temporary, that soon, everything he had stolen would come crashing down around him. I just had to be patient. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. Justin had already left, which meant I had time to work. I grabbed my phone, checking for updates from Ellie. Ellie, I found something big. Call me. My stomach flipped as I dialed her number. She picked up immediately. Okay, she said, skipping the greeting. Are you alone? Yes. Good. Because you're going to want to hear this. I sat up, gripping the phone tighter. Tell me. She took a deep breath. Justin Carlisle doesn't exist. I froze. What? The name is fake. He started using it 5 years ago. Before that? Nothing. No records. No birth certificate. No history. My blood turned to ice. Who is he? I whispered. I don't know yet, she admitted. But I did find something else. The shell company he used to get that loan? It's not his first. I pressed a hand to my forehead. How many? At least 3 others. And Claire, every single one of them had a fiancé attached to it. I felt like I was going to be sick. He's done this before, I whispered. Yeah. And if the pattern holds, he's going to disappear soon. Panic *T through me. If he ran before we had enough evidence, he'd get away with everything. He'd do this to someone else. We need to stop him, I said, my voice hard. Ellie's tone matched mine. I have a plan. We spent the next hour putting the pieces together. Justin was smart, but he had a weakness, his ego. He liked to be the smartest guy in the room, the one who controlled everything. If I made him believe he was still in control, he wouldn't suspect a thing. I had to act normal. I had to keep playing the perfect fiancé while Ellie worked behind the scenes to track his money, his contacts, anything that could tie him to the fraud. It was the longest week of my life. I smiled when I wanted to scream. I kissed him when I wanted to punch him. I let him hold me, whispering about our future, while I counted down the days until his world collapsed. Ellie was relentless. Every night, she sent me updates, hidden accounts, encrypted messages, offshore transfers. Piece by piece, we built a case against him. And then, finally, we had what we needed. Claire, Ellie said one night, her voice vibrating with excitement. We got him. She had traced one of his accounts to a fraudulent wire transfer $250,000 stolen from another woman, funneled through the same company he had attached to my name. This was it. The proof. I exhaled slowly, gripping my phone. It's time. The next morning, I called Justin from work. Hey, babe, I said sweetly. Let's do something special tonight. Just us. He chuckled. Sounds perfect. What's the occasion? Just love you, that's all. He bought it. Of course, he did. That night, I made dinner. Candles. Wine. The whole thing. I let him kiss me, touch me, hold me close like he hadn't betrayed me in the worst way possible. And then, when the moment was perfect, I leaned in close, my lips brushing against his ear. You should have been smarter. He tensed. What? I pulled back, smiling sweetly. You got sloppy, Justin. His eyes darted around the room like he was looking for an escape. Claire, I don't. I slid a flash drive across the table. That's everything. Every stolen dollar. Every fraudulent account. Every lie. His face went pale. The FBI has it now, I continued. So does the bank. The SEC. Every agency that deals with financial fraud. He *T up from the chair. Claire, this isn't. Sit. Down. For the first time, he looked afraid. I tilted my head. What's wrong? Not used to being outplayed. His jaw clenched. You don't know what you're doing. I laughed. Oh, but I do. His hand twitched like he wanted to grab his phone. I leaned forward. Go ahead. Call whoever you want. It won't matter. His breathing turned sharp, shallow. Claire. I trusted you, I said softly. I loved you. And you stole from me. His expression wavered, like he wanted to play the sympathy card, but I wasn't that woman anymore. I stood, grabbing my keys. You have 20 minutes before they get here. He flinched. Who? I smirked. Guess. And then I walked out the door, leaving him behind. By the time the police arrived, I was sitting on Ellie's couch, sipping wine. The news broke the next morning: financial scammer caught in multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. Justin's real name was Ryan Carter. He had done this to 4 other women before me. He wasn't just a liar. He was a criminal. And now he was going to prison. Ellie nudged me. How does it feel? I exhaled slowly. Like justice. I had loved him. But now? I loved the idea of him rotting in a cell even more. The days after Justin's arrest passed in a blur. News outlets picked up the story, plastering his real name across headlines. Ryan Carter, a con artist who had stolen from multiple women, had finally been caught. The FBI confirmed that the fraudulent accounts traced back years, each scheme more elaborate than the last. They estimated he had stolen nearly $2 million in total, and I had been his latest and, unknowingly, most valuable mark. I stayed at Ellie's for the first few nights, unwilling to go back to the apartment we had shared. The thought of being in that space, touching the things we had picked out together, made my stomach turn. It wasn't just the betrayal that haunted me, it was the fact that he had never been real. Every kiss, every promise, every whispered dream about our future together had been a performance. Ellie sat next to me on the couch, her laptop open as she scrolled through yet another article about him. This one says he might have been involved in a bigger financial crime ring. She whistled. Damn. You really caught a big fish. I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. She nudged me. How are you feeling? I exhaled. I don't know. Relieved, I guess. But also sick. Like I let this happen. Like I should have seen it. Ellie shut her laptop. Stop that. He fooled everyone. The guy literally built an entire fake identity. You didn't let anything happen. He was a professional liar. I nodded, but the guilt still lingered. Ellie sighed. You need a distraction. She was right. I had spent 3 years planning a life with a man who didn't exist. I had put my trust in him, my future, my finances. He had taken everything, and I had spent weeks playing the perfect fiancé, pretending I wasn't aware of the betrayal. Now that it was over, I felt unmoored. 2 days later, I returned to the apartment to pack my things. Walking through the door, everything looked the same, but it felt different. Colder. I moved through the space mechanically, grabbing clothes, shoes, anything I didn't want to leave behind. As I reached for a framed photo of us on a trip to Napa, I hesitated. Had that trip been real? Had any of it? I slammed the picture face down on the dresser, chest tight. Then, something caught my eye. A small safe in the back of the closet, one I had never noticed before. My pulse kicked up as I crouched down, running my fingers along the edge. It was locked. I grabbed a hanger, twisting the metal to press into the lock. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to stay steady. A few tries later, the lock popped open. Inside were stacks of cash, foreign currency, multiple IDs with different names, different identities. A burner phone. A passport. He had been planning to run. My vision blurred with rage. He had been preparing for the moment things fell apart, ready to disappear and do this to someone else. I grabbed everything and shoved it into a duffel bag. The FBI would want to see this. A knock at the door made me jump. I turned, heart pounding, but it wasn't the police. It was a woman. Tall, mid-30s, with dark circles under her eyes and an expression that was equal parts wary and desperate. I opened the door cautiously. Can I help you? Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Are you Claire? I gripped the door tighter. Who's asking? She exhaled shakily. My name is Rebecca. I think we were both engaged to the same man. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I let her in, shutting the door behind us. She took a seat on the couch, wringing her hands. She looked exhausted. How did you find me? I asked, my voice tight. Rebecca gave a small, humorless laugh. The same way you found him. By digging. She reached into her bag, pulling out a folder. I hired a private investigator when things stopped making sense. I thought I was going crazy. I knew the feeling. I took the folder, flipping through pages of records, photos, financial transactions. I was engaged to him 3 years ago, she said quietly. But his name wasn't Justin then. It was Daniel. I kept my expression neutral, but my pulse pounded. She went on. We were together for almost 2 years. He told me he was starting a business, just like he told you. He convinced me to take out loans in my name because his credit had complications. She scoffed bitterly. I was so in love with him. I would have done anything. I looked at her, my stomach twisting. How did it end? Rebecca's jaw clenched. He drained our joint account and disappeared. Left me with $80,000 of debt and no way to find him. Jesus. I shut the folder. I'm so sorry. She shook her head. I got my life back. But when I saw the news, when I saw your name, I had to find you. I understood now. Rebecca wasn't here for revenge. She was here because she needed to see proof that she wasn't alone. That the man who had destroyed her life wasn't just a ghost. She hesitated. Did you love him? I swallowed hard. Yeah, I did. She nodded, her expression unreadable. Me too. Silence hung between us, heavy with shared pain. Finally, she reached into her bag again, pulling out a set of papers. The police think he acted alone, but I don't. I frowned. What do you mean? She tapped the pages. There's a pattern. Every time he starts a new scheme, there's always a third party, someone moving money behind the scenes. I scanned the documents, my heart racing. If she was right, then Justin or Ryan, or whatever his real name was, wasn't just a con artist. He was part of something much bigger. Ellie arrived an hour later, her eyes widening when she saw Rebecca. I explained everything quickly, showing her the files, the money, the evidence from the safe. Ellie sat back, blowing out a breath. Okay, so, what's the plan? I looked at Rebecca, then at Ellie. Justin was in custody. His scam was over. But if someone else had helped him, if someone else was profiting off what he had done, then they wouldn't stop just because he was behind bars. I clenched my jaw. We find out who helped him, I said. And we take them down too. Rebecca nodded. Ellie grinned. Now we're talking. It took another 3 days of digging, but we found it. A business account linked to the same shell corporations Justin had used, only this one wasn't in his name. It belonged to someone else. A man named Richard Langley. He owned multiple companies, all tied to suspicious transactions. Offshore accounts. Unexplained wire transfers. And according to his LinkedIn profile, he was a financial consultant. Ellie whistled. He's laundering the money. My stomach churned. He knew what Justin was doing. He probably helped him set it up. Rebecca exhaled. Which means he's still out there. And still making money off people like us. I closed my laptop, a slow, steady rage building in my chest. Justin had stolen from me. From Rebecca. From countless other women. But he wasn't the only one. There was someone else pulling the strings. And now we were going to pull his whole operation apart. Ellie cracked her knuckles. Let's ruin this guy. Rebecca smiled for the first time. I grinned back. Justin thought he had played us. But now it was our turn to play the game. Ellie worked fast. Within hours, she had mapped out Richard Langley's financial network, tracing every account linked to his name. The deeper we dug, the worse it got. This guy isn't just laundering money, Ellie muttered, scrolling through pages of transactions. He's running a full-scale operation. She turned the laptop toward me and Rebecca, showing us a string of offshore accounts connected to fake companies. Some of them led back to Justin Ryan, but others were tied to different people, different cons. Rebecca folded her arms. So he's been doing this long before Justin came along. Ellie nodded. He's the architect. Justin was just another pawn. I clenched my jaw. Then we take him down. Ellie leaned back, chewing on her pen. Not that simple. He's careful. No direct links to the fraud, just a guy offering financial consulting to his clients. We need to connect him directly to Justin's crimes. I stared at the laptop, mind racing. What if we get him to slip up? Ellie raised an eyebrow. You want to bait him? Rebecca exhaled. He's too smart for that. Ellie frowned. Maybe, but we have something he wants. I looked at her. Justin's money. She grinned. Exactly. The cash from Justin's safe was still sitting in a duffel bag in my car. Nearly 50 grand in assorted currencies. A drop in the bucket compared to what he had stolen, but enough to make Richard pay attention. Rebecca leaned forward. We make it look like Justin set something up before he got arrested. A backup plan. I nodded. A final payout. Something Richard doesn't know about. Ellie smirked. And then we watch him come running. The plan came together quickly. Ellie created a fake email account using Justin's writing style, drafting a message that sounded like something he would send under pressure. Subject, contingency plan. Rich, sh*T went sideways. Had to move fast. 50 still in play. Need a new drop. Same terms. We attached a location, an abandoned warehouse in the city. A place where we could control everything. Ellie encrypted the email, making it look like it had been sent before Justin's arrest. Then, we waited. 2 days passed. No response. I started to wonder if we had miscalculated, but then, at 3:12 a.m., a reply came through. Subject. Contingency plan. Not secure. Details. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. He had taken the bait. Ellie cracked her knuckles. Now we reel him in. She replied as Justin, keeping it vague but urgent. Not on email. Meet at the docks. 11 p.m. No extras. Less than an hour later, Richard responded. Understood. Rebecca exhaled. Jesus. That was almost too easy. I nodded, nerves buzzing. Now we need backup. Ellie had an old contact in law enforcement, a detective named Brian Ferguson who specialized in financial crimes. She set up a meeting, explaining everything we had found. He was skeptical at first, but the moment he saw the evidence, his expression hardened. This is solid, he admitted. But we need him making an actual transaction to nail him. I nodded. That's what tomorrow night is for. Ferguson agreed to set up surveillance, but he warned us not to get directly involved. If this guy's been running scams for years, he's not going to take chances. If he suspects a setup, he'll disappear. That was the risk. The next night, we arrived at the docks early. Ferguson's team set up in unmarked cars, watching from a distance. Rebecca and I stayed out of sight while Ellie handled communication. At exactly 10:59 p.m., a black Mercedes pulled up. Richard Langley stepped out. He was older than I expected, mid-50s, dressed in a tailored suit despite the cold night air. He looked around, his sharp gaze scanning for anything unusual. Ellie, standing near a stack of shipping crates, waved casually. Rich. He eyed her. Where's Ryan? Ellie smirked. Busy. She held up the duffel bag. 50K, just like he said. Where's the drop? Richard's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. That depends. Why haven't I heard from him? Ellie shrugged. He told me to handle it. Richard studied her for a long moment. Then, he nodded to one of his men, a tall guy with a buzz cut, standing near the car. The guy stepped forward, reaching for the bag. Ellie didn't move. Not until I know it's clean. Richard chuckled. You don't trust me? Ellie smiled. Justin didn't. And you know how he is. That was enough. Richard's expression darkened, and for the first time, I saw it. The frustration, the paranoia of a man who had spent years covering his tracks. He turned slightly, pulling out his phone. The second he unlocked it, Ferguson's team moved in. Lights flashed. Voices shouted. Hands where we can see them. Richard froze, eyes widening as officers swarmed in from all sides. His guy reached for something under his jacket, but Ferguson was faster. Don't. The guy dropped his hands. Richard's expression shifted from shock to cold calculation. I want a lawyer. Ferguson smiled. Oh, you're gonna need one. It was over in minutes. The moment they secured Richard's phone, Ferguson gave me a small nod. We got him. Rebecca exhaled, gripping my arm. Holy sh*T. Ellie grinned. That felt good. Over the next few days, the case unraveled. Richard had been running financial fraud for over a decade, laundering money for criminals across multiple states. The accounts we found linked to more than just Justin. There were other names, other victims. A full-scale investigation launched. More arrests followed. Rebecca and I testified. We told our stories, handed over everything we had. It took weeks, but eventually, Richard Langley was indicted on multiple charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering. The last time I saw him was in court. He looked different in a jumpsuit, smaller somehow. When they read his sentence, 30 years, Rebecca squeezed my hand. It was finally over. Months passed. Life moved forward. Rebecca started a nonprofit for victims of financial fraud. She reached out to the women Justin had scammed before us, offering them legal resources, support. Ellie got a promotion, her work on the case earning her national recognition. And me? I found myself again. The anger, the betrayal, it didn't consume me anymore. I moved into a new place, started fresh. One day, an envelope arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single note. Smart girl. I stared at the words, heart pounding. Ellie traced the postmark. It wasn't from prison. Someone else sent this. A warning. Or a challenge. Rebecca set the letter down carefully. We stopped Richard. But there are more like him. I nodded, fingers tightening around the paper. I wasn't afraid anymore. I looked at Ellie, then Rebecca. Then let's find them. Because the game wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ellie traced the envelope's edges, her expression unreadable. Someone's watching. Rebecca exhaled, running a hand through her hair. We knew this wasn't over. I stared at the note, just 2 words written in bold, blocky handwriting. Smart girl. There was no signature. No indication of who sent it. But we all knew. Richard Langley wasn't the top of the pyramid. He was just one piece of a much larger network. Ellie pulled out her laptop and started typing. I'm running a scan on the Postal Service logs. If they paid in cash, it'll be harder to trace, but if they used a card. A knock at the door made us all jump. **TA glance at Rebecca. She nodded, stepping to the side, out of immediate view. Ellie grabbed her phone, ready to dial. I inhaled sharply, forcing myself to stay calm as I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Detective Brian Ferguson. I exhaled, my pulse still racing as I opened the door. You're going to give me a heart attack. He raised an eyebrow. That makes 2 of us. He held up a folder. You need to see this. I stepped aside, letting him in. Rebecca and Ellie relaxed slightly but stayed alert. Ferguson set the folder on the table, flipping it open. Inside were pages of documents. Account ledgers, transaction records. Langley wasn't just laundering money, Ferguson said. He was a middleman. Ellie leaned forward. For who? Ferguson's expression darkened. That's the problem. We don't know. Rebecca frowned. So you're saying Richard wasn't the one running things? Ferguson shook his head. No. He facilitated the fraud, moved the money, but the real power? That's still out there. I swallowed hard. And now they know we're watching. Ferguson slid another page toward me. Recognize this? I stared at the address. My old apartment. The one I had shared with Justin. I looked up sharply. What about it? Someone was there 2 nights ago. Broken, but nothing was taken. A chill ran down my spine. Rebecca sat up straighter. They're looking for something. Ellie's fingers flew across her keyboard. If they went back there, they think something's still hidden. I thought back to Justin's safe, the burner phones, the IDs. What if we missed something? Ferguson tapped the folder. We have Langley's entire operation mapped out. But there's a missing piece, one account that keeps getting flagged. It's active, but we can't access it. I exhaled. Justin's. Ferguson nodded. Or whoever's above him. Ellie turned the laptop screen toward us. I pulled all financial logs from the past year. Someone's still moving money through those accounts. Small amounts, just enough to avoid detection. Rebecca's eyes narrowed. They're still running the scam. I clenched my fists. Then we shut it down. Ferguson sighed. We have to be smart. We're dealing with people who don't like loose ends. Langley is in prison, but his boss? They just sent you a message. I looked at the note again. Smart girl. Not a threat. A warning. Ellie cracked her knuckles. So we bait them. Rebecca's lips curled into a smirk. You have a plan? Ellie grinned. Always. We spent the next few days preparing. Ferguson's team worked in the background, tracking the mysterious account while Ellie set up a digital footprint, one that made it look like I was accessing Justin's files. If they thought I had something valuable, they'd come to me. By the fourth day, we got a hit. An email. Encrypted, routed through multiple servers, but Ellie cracked it within minutes. Subject, we need to talk. Meet me. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. Warehouse District. Come alone. Rebecca scoffed. Yeah, that's not suspicious at all. Ferguson studied the message. They're testing you. Seeing if you'll show. Ellie grinned. They don't know she's not alone. We went in prepared. Ferguson's team was in place long before I arrived. Hidden cameras, undercover officers, the whole setup. At exactly 8 p.m., I stepped into the warehouse. My heart pounded, but I kept my face neutral. A man stood in the shadows. Late 40s, sharp suit, eyes that never stopped moving. You're persistent, he said. His voice was smooth, like he was used to being in control. I tilted my head. I could say the same about you. He smirked. Richard was sloppy. You? Not so much. I crossed my arms. Who are you? He chuckled. Names don't matter. What matters is that you have something that belongs to me. I raised an eyebrow. Oh! He took a slow step forward. The files. The account records. Everything Langley kept off the books. I played dumb. And why would I have those? His smirk widened. Because you're not stupid. You were engaged to Ryan Carter, and yet, here you are. Which means you figured it out. I let a silence stretch before I said, and if I did? His expression didn't change, but his tone did. Then I suggest you hand them over. Before this gets complicated. There it was. The threat. I smiled. You think I came here alone? His eyes flicked behind me, scanning the shadows. Ferguson's team moved in. Within seconds, he was surrounded. His smirk faltered, just slightly. Impressive. Ferguson stepped forward, badge raised. Marcus Lane, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. Marcus exhaled through his nose, nodding slightly, like he had expected this. You really are a smart girl. I folded my arms. Yeah, I get that a lot. It was over. Marcus was the missing link. The orchestrator. The man who had built an empire of fraud, using people like Justin Ryan as disposable tools. Over the next few weeks, arrests continued. More names, more accounts, more victims. Rebecca and I testified again, this time against Marcus and the entire network. When the trial ended, Marcus Lane was sentenced to 35 years. Rebecca leaned over. I'll drink to that. I smiled. Make it 2. The night of the sentencing, we sat on Ellie's rooftop, watching the city lights. Rebecca swirled her drink. Feels like we won. Ellie smirked. We did. I exhaled, feeling lighter than I had in years. So what's next? Rebecca grinned. Justice fund for fraud victims? Ellie wiggled her brows. Cybersecurity firm? I laughed. Why not both? Because this wasn't just about us anymore. There were more out there, people like Justin, like Marcus, like Langley. And if they thought they could keep running the same game, they had no idea what was coming. I raised my glass. To the next takedown. Ellie and Rebecca clinked their glasses against mine. And just like that, the game changed forever.